Coming up on Wrestling Life.
Some idolized you and would hang around you and want to be your best friend. Then you had some detractors, right? Who would put you to the test, and as soon as they said, wrestling's all fake or they're just a bunch of stuntmen, the fight was on.
Welcome to Wrestling Life with Ben Veal, the show that features real talk from real talent.
Hello and welcome to this very special episode of Wrestling Life with Ben Veal. This show is all about telling the real stories behind those that have positively shaped wrestling's past, present and future. And we need you to grow, so please do subscribe and follow our socials. Very simply, we are at Wrestling Life. Or even at Wrestling Life Online. Joining me today from wrestling's most illustrious family, he is the son of Stu and Helen Hart, brother of Bret Hitman Hart and the Rocket Owen Hart, brother-in-law of the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith, Jim the Anvil Neidhart and the Dynamite Kid Tom Billington, and he is a Stampede Wrestling star, booker and promoter in his own right. Hailing from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, I've always wanted to do that, it is my privilege to welcome to the show today Ross Hart. Ross, thank you for joining me. How are you?
Great. Great introduction, Ben. You've got a natural voice for wrestling.
And a face for radio. It's not it's not quite how I think, is it?
No, but it's a pleasure to be on here, and I'm looking forward to reminiscing and reflecting, about the industry and some of my family experiences.
Well, as I understand it, you are the encyclopedia of Hart family knowledge.
I've been called that. I hope my memory's standing up over the years, but yeah, I have a pretty good recollection, of a lot of the important trends in the industry and, the highs and lows, I guess, of Stampede. And, part of that, I guess, is being a teacher as well and having a good recall and memory skills. So, yeah.
How long have you been teaching for?
I've been teaching over 30 years, which is great. It was kind of a nice outlet after I kind of stepped away from the wrestling industry in the 90s, and but I still follow wrestling a lot and keep up with all the trends and changes in the industry.
And I imagine all of your students are pretty well aware of your family's background.
Some of them, they kind of know us on a first name basis. So at where I teach. So I don't get that instant recognition. And then all of a sudden it pops in their heads months after that maybe I taught their parents or that their parents used to go to Stampede wrestling shows or they watched Bret and Owen on WWE. And they're pretty amazed when they make that revelation.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. So look, I want to go back, Ross, to kind of the very early days. So I want to go back to your childhood. I mean, you are one of 12 children, which is incredible. What was it like growing up and literally fighting for your place in a house amongst so many siblings?
It was insane at times, a great experience, but 12 kids, and I was one of the younger ones. I was the 10th out of 12. So, I had a lot of older brothers and sisters, I had to kind of bow down to and be respectful of, but, it was always busy. There was always something going on. My parents are running the wrestling business out of there. So there were phone calls coming all the time, from wrestlers about the shows and where they were meeting. And then, sponsors and advertisers, groups that wanted to book shows. So that was going on all the time. And my parents were just kind of running the household, feeding us and getting us off to school every day. So they were both workaholics, but they did an amazing job, keeping us straight and, raising a family and, keeping that house going because it was a historical house and there's always something breaking down or going wrong. We'd lose our heat maybe or the furnace wouldn't be working or something. And my dad would have to deal with that, and still keep the business going as well and keeping us safe and well raised, but my parents did an incredible job, and it was a lot of fun growing up there.
Tell me a bit about your mum, Helen Hart, because she's always struck me from everything I've read and heard as a pretty incredible individual. I mean, not only raising 12 children against such an unusual backdrop, but also playing a really key role in the day-to-day kind of business operations of Stampede. But as I understand it, she wasn't ever really a fan of professional wrestling itself. Is that fair to say?
No, she really wasn't. Years later, she was involved in some of the storylines with Brett when he was in the WWE, and even when he had that feud with Owen, the brother against brother feud. But as we were growing up, she really didn't have much interest in wrestling. She never watched it on TV, but she had interactions with all the wrestlers and a lot of fans, who would call up on the phone and want to get information about the cards. And, it was long before we had websites or internet information. So our house was always the Grand Central station for wrestlers, fans, anyone calling about the promotion. My mom would be dealing with them firsthand on the phone, but she never really watched wrestling. She was very refined. She just liked to read a lot. She was very well educated. She could have been a school teacher, but she was just an excellent paralegal secretary. She could type almost 200 words a minute, and she knew shorthand. Wow. And she knew accounting and bookkeeping. So she ran my dad's business for him, did the payroll every week, and looked after all the business transactions. So she was like a paralegal, an accountant, and bookkeeper and receptionist all in one, and a mom on top of that. So just an amazing woman, but she had a very special relationship with all the wrestlers and everyone involved in the business. And it was kind of the softer side of the business, because with my dad, you had to deal with him on pay and working in the territory. And if you weren't happy with the guys you were wrestling or the push you were getting, you had to deal with my dad for that. But my mom, it was always a very empathetic approach, with wrestlers who called, and a lot of them just loved calling and speaking with my mom on the phone, because it kind of got them away from the stress, I guess, of working in a pretty tough industry at times.
And you've mentioned it already, but the legendary Hart House, the Hart Mansion. I mean, it's a property that is such a rich part of kind of wrestling lore, and that's large part in thanks to the dungeon that produced so many top talents over the years. How would you describe life living in Hart House growing up?
Pretty amazing. Like the dungeon was in the basement, and that was sort of my dad's workshop. That's where he trained a lot of aspiring wrestlers, and he would put them through the test. And for my dad, he never charged anybody, he never collected a fee to train anyone. But if you were going to break into wrestling through him, you had to go through him. And it was very punishing. He would take these guys in the gym, and he would stretch them pretty good. He would lock up with them, and sometimes they would go back and forth, for 20-30 minutes, just pushing each other back and forth. And then my dad would say, all right, go for a move, see if he can take me down or get behind me or control me. And usually they never could, but he had all sorts of guys. He had martial arts guys, he had boxers, he had rodeo stars, football players, weightlifters, bodybuilders, some of these ranch hands, just big, strong, tough guys. And my dad would usually break them, and he would get them on the mat, and he would punish them. He would get them in double grapevines or thread throughs, and he wouldn't let up. We'd go from one hole to another, but he wanted these guys to know how tough wrestling should be, and it shouldn't be an easy cakewalk to get into. And if you survived my dad's first few sessions and kept coming back, and you wanted to learn from him, then he would eventually break you in. But a lot of guys didn't come back after the first few sessions. It was pretty painful, and it was humbling. And a lot of them, had no idea my dad could be that formidable. And I mean, he was just he was very punishing. He was strong. He had really good technique. He could counter just about any moves that they tried on him. And, so it was a very tough initiation for a lot of guys, that broke in with him. But those who did, turned out to be pretty good wrestlers. So that was kind of my dad's place where he would train and work out in the evenings. And it was his time away from the family and away from the daily stressors of the business. And that's where he liked to be the most, and he had nobody bothering him, no phone calls, no interruptions. And even if my mom was trying to reach him or call him, he would usually just ignore her and just keep working out in the gym. And once he was on the mat with somebody, he wasn't going to stop that for anything, and he would continue his assault on them until the session was over.
But that's what I love. I mean, when I was researching, getting ready to speak with you, Ross, I read that one of the earliest memories you had was hearing people kind of screaming in the dungeon and being worked on by your dad.
Yeah, we would hear that like on the floor above, and when we hear these groans and screams, and when we knew what was going on there, and so sometimes we'd see them when they arrived, and it would be kind of a warming up process, and they would sometimes lift some weights or do a little cardio, and then they would step on the mat with my dad, and we knew it was just a matter of time, before he unleashed his assault on them. So, but and we didn't get to go down and watch any of his sessions until we were older, until we were in our teens. And then my dad wanted us to actually watch it and see it, so we could learn from what he was teaching. And he said wrestling was a really good form of self-defense if you ever needed it. If somebody was assaulting you or attacking you, or even in a street fight or something. So, and his philosophy was that a good wrestler could win any kind of a fight. Even if it's somebody who's a boxer or kickboxer or somebody in martial arts. So, it was kind of before the day of MMA, where it's now wrestling and boxing and Muay Thai and all of that combined. But back then it was traditionally just wrestling, boxing, and maybe judo or karate. So my dad's eyes, a good wrestler could win any duel or match, if you subdued somebody and got them on the ground, and then just held them there and got them in a submission hold of some kind, and then wore them out and took their stamina away from them. So as we got older, he kind of opened the doors and let us go down there and watch, as long as we stayed quiet and respectful and just listened and learned.
When did watching become you actually participating and going through those sessions yourself?
I think when I got a little older, and I got a little more size, so maybe when I was about 16 or 17, I started working out with my dad and with my older brothers as well. And then I think maybe when I was in university and wrestling then, so he would use me and some of my brothers, Owen or whoever was around, and showcase what he could to us. Sometimes it would be a large audience, maybe 8 or 9 wrestlers. Sometimes it was just a few of us, so he was a very good teacher, and he really explained the rationale, of applying holds and countering. For every move that you could apply, there was a counter or an escape, and then how you counter that guy's escape mechanism. So my dad was just a very thorough teacher, with the submission wrestling, it was very punishing because you'd have your head pressed against your belly or your arms and legs in a very uncomfortable position, and there's nothing you could do about it, and usually it'd be just a torture chamber for 30 or 40 minutes, until you'd passed out or he finally let up on you and decided to wrestle with somebody else.
So you're living in this kind of half house, half kind of training ground for wrestlers. Did you realize from a very young age that you were having a pretty unusual childhood?
Yeah, different from other kids. Where we lived was kind of in a rural area, so we weren't close to hockey rinks or community centers or playgrounds or anything like that. So we were pretty isolated, and there wasn't a lot for us to do where we lived. We didn't have a lot of neighbors. There was a school bus that would pick us up and take us to and from school every day. So it was definitely a different life growing up. And then every Friday night we were at the matches in the pavilion in Calgary. So that was kind of our big weekend activity. We would go down and watch the live show at the pavilion, and just so many memories of all the big names and stars that came through there, especially like during our Stampede shows in July. And then we would watch the TV show on Saturday. It would be on one day later for an hour. So wrestling pretty much consumed our weekends there, and it was definitely different childhood than most kids lived.
And what was school like for you? Because I've read in Brett's book that he talked about challenges against kind of having to step up to bullies in the schoolyard, and that it was quite challenging for him being from a wrestling family. Did you and your siblings have the same experience?
Yeah, I think all of us kind of grew up with that. Sometimes we had a lot of kids that envied us, that wanted to hang around with us because there was so much notoriety about wrestling. So many people watched it on TV, and there wasn't a lot else to watch on TV. I think maybe we had worldwide world of sports or something for 1 hour late Saturday afternoons, but there wasn't a lot on. Maybe some CFL football, and hockey really didn't take off until the 70s, at least in Calgary. Maybe it was just in Toronto and Montreal where they had teams, but so wrestling was a huge TV attraction every Saturday afternoon, all over Western Canada. So a lot of kids watched the show, and some idolized you and would hang around you and want to be your best friend. And then you had some detractors, right, who would put you to the test, and as soon as they said, wrestling's all fake, or they're just a bunch of stuntmen, the fight was on, so, and you'd be defending your family's and your dad's honor, so a lot of us kind of went through that, through those interactions, sometimes with bullies, sometimes people that were just sort of jealous of the notoriety that we had, but it was definitely interesting, but we certainly were recognized. A lot of people knew us, and my dad always just said, be good students, be respectful of others, and you don't flaunt your celebrity status with anybody, and be respectful of everybody, be humble, because everybody has their day, and if you push yourself too hard, you're always going to find somebody that's tougher than you, right? Or some obstacle that you can't overcome. So, I think our parents taught us a lot about, being respectful and tolerant of others, because we weren't going to be well received by everybody.
You're saying about some of the taunts there about wrestling as fake. I mean, how old were you when you were actually smartened up to the nature of the business? Because we're talking about a different time here, aren't we?
Yeah. Probably not till I was about 12 or 13 years old. It kind of dawned on me, maybe if Archie the Stomper goalie or Abdullah the Butcher, one of the lead heels in the promotion, had altercations with my dad, on the storylines of the matches. My dad actually stepped out of retirement as a promoter to wrestle these guys, kind of as the enforcer, or he had to deal with the villain that was kind of out of control and breaking all the rules. And, and then my dad would step out of retirement, and fans all knew he was kind of an ex-wrestler and promoter. So he would step into battle, and that wasn't very often, every few years. And it was always a big draw, to see Stu come out of retirement and fight Abdullah or the Stomper, and some of them were pretty heated clashes, bloodbaths sometimes. And my parents were always pretty careful not to tell us storylines like that. They kind of kept the business separate from us. But when I saw some of those wrestlers, who were engaged in altercations with my dad, or even had attacked my dad, or had matches with him, and I was pretty terrified of them, I thought, gee, maybe they'll come after our whole family. Stomper was saying he's going to come up to the house and immobilize my dad, and then drop my mother on the highway or something, so I was pretty scared of that, and it was just a storyline, but it was very intense, and then a few months later, I saw Archie up at our house. He was coming up to pick up a check from my parents, and and he was very calm and quiet. And I thought, well, gee, I don't think he's gotten over his anger, so I kind of started to realize, maybe there's a bit of a separation here between what's happening at the shows and what happened at my parents' houses, right? So so I'd say by the time I was about 12 or 13, I kind of figured it out. But I always kept that a secret. The last thing I wanted to do was ever spoil that enjoyment for fans, because so many people wanted to suspend their beliefs, and they wanted to see it as real, even though a lot of them kind of had some suspicions maybe that they couldn't be trying to hurt each other that much, or some of it's a little exaggerated or animated, but the majority of fans, and I think it's still the same today, want to suspend their beliefs and be convinced what they're seeing is a real struggle, a real fight, a real showdown, between two different types, two people that have a real grudge or an issue. And so I kept that to myself, and I didn't share that secret with too many others.
And obviously you're I mean, it's hard for, as you say, but when you're living in a house which is, essentially running the promotion and dealing with all the actual financial and business operations, hard to avoid that. But in terms of the wider fan base, it was very fiercely protected, wasn't it? The baby faces would travel separately to the heels, and never would the two meet in public. Very different time, and a time when that suspension of disbelief was a lot easier, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really that kayfabe period, right? So heels and baby faces were really careful not to be seen together. They would never be in restaurants together or even share hotel rooms together. And we had to be careful when we were driving wrestlers, so that people out and about in the city or town, anywhere, it could be Calgary, it could be a small rural place where we had a spot show, didn't see wrestlers traveling together, because as soon as fans maybe saw that, that just totally broke the mystique, of them, being competitors and really fighting each other in the ring. So now, I think it was that way in most territories, and there's that very strict idea about kayfabe and protecting the business, and you didn't smarten other fans up or people, and that was hard sometimes because wrestlers, even members of our family, we had relationships with other people, maybe not even in the family circles or close to the business, but we had to kind of separate wrestling, and keep that very secret or very confidential, so we didn't betray those secrets, and spoil the enjoyment for fans who really loved watching it, and would get caught up in the storylines, and and we were protecting the business for those who worked so hard to preserve it, all those wrestlers that worked hard every day. And if you're going around and telling your friends it's all just a show, and it's not real, then you're really hurting their living, and doing that, so for us, it was really important, and my parents just said, you don't discuss those things with your friends or fans or anybody, and let them enjoy it, at their own level, so we, I think, did a pretty good job of that.
So you cut your teeth at a very young age with Stampede. I read that you were selling programs by the age of 6. And then you moved into Stampede, obviously as a performer, and then later as a booker and a promoter too. And you had a role in its revival as well towards the end of the 90s. Can you share some of your kind of favorite Stampede memories with me from your time as a
it was I was selling programs when I was about 6 years old, and for us, we were selling programs for a quarter, and we would be lucky if we made $2 maybe from selling all our programs, and we'd be outside sometimes in minus 20, 30 weather, trying to catch all the fans coming in before they got into the arena to buy a program. It would be just a quarter, and my older brother Brett was selling programs, and so he and I would be trying to sell ours first, and we always had a competition over which spot we could sell our programs in. It was whoever could get there first, right? And if we got to that one spot, then the other had to kind of move into a lesser area, where there weren't as many fans entering the building, So we had some pretty heated rivalries, Brett and I, over who got first dibs, basically, who could sell our programs, because what we wanted to do is sell all our programs, collect our money, and then get inside to watch the matches, when the show started at 8:30. But, and then as I grew older, there were different roles, setting up rings, sometimes going, to some of the smaller shows and doing everything from setting up the rings to the chairs and tables. Sometimes when I wasn't in school, I would go and do all the postering for a show and things like that, and we'd set up radio or TV ads and newspaper ads for the show. So I kind of did that, and I got involved in, kind of all aspects of the industry, and then sometimes helping my mom in the office just with the payroll, and I would let her know which wrestlers were wrestling on which nights, and so if she didn't get that information already, so I was kind of her seeing eye dog, so to speak, that would help her with the payroll on Fridays. And then, by the time I got out of high school, I had a lot of different roles, sometimes working security at the shows. You'd work as a bouncer. You'd have to throw out some fans that got too lively or, got too involved with the wrestlers. And sometimes we'd have some pretty good scraps with these fans, that wanted to try on a wrestler or take them on. And, we never seemed to have police or security there. We had to kind of do that ourselves. There was that, and then even refereeing some shows, and then I kind of got more involved behind the scenes, like writing programs and then corresponding with different magazines, and trying to showcase our promotion and territory and some of our top wrestlers, because back then the NWA was sort of the big group in wrestling in North America, and then the WWF more in the northeastern states, and the AWA in the central states was pretty big, so I was sort of involved in getting regional coverage for a lot of our wrestlers, and I would be, sending monthly reports and results, to all these different publications, and that's sort of where my writing skills came in handy, and that made me a much better student in English, and to this day I said my teaching skills in school and, being able to write essays and reports all came from what I was doing in the office for wrestling so many years ago. So it was nice that there's kind of a transferable skill that I could carry from wrestling to my teaching career years later. And then I did some wrestling as well. I wasn't as big a name as Brett or Owen or even Bruce or Keith, but I had that experience. I had that opportunity. So for me, I think what's unique about my experience is I did just about everything, not just wrestling and refereeing, but all behind the scenes things, training guys in the dungeon. I was involved with my brother Bruce and some of his training camps, and traveled with Owen, and we wrestled in Europe together and had matches in the UK, so I did just about everything, and it was a great experience, and I wouldn't have traded it for anything.
This episode of Wrestling Life is brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Legacy Sports Nutrition. Take your physical and mental performance to the next level with Test X9, the natural testosterone booster. Clinically proven, Test X9 from Legacy Sports Nutrition is NSF certified, third-party lab tested, and made in the US of A. And it's brought to you by friends of the show, 3-time world champion Nick Aldis and 10-time world champion Mickey James. Nick developed and uses these products himself, so they work, and he shows you how over at legacysubs.com, with links to clinical studies on each of the 9 key ingredients. No bull, no bro science, just facts. It's time to level up your strength, energy, libido and drive now with Test X9 from Legacy Sports Nutrition. And if you want to really level up, go for the ultimate test stack, adding T-Assist, a pro-grade estrogen inhibitor and test enhancer, and the best-selling sleep aid Recovery PM, and discover why improving your sleep is the key to unlocking your mental and physical potential. So stop settling for average, Go to legacysups.com now and use the promo code WrestlingLife for 10% off your entire order. That's promo code WrestlingLife. And if you subscribe to have it shipped every 30 days, you can still get the discount every single time. So head on over now to legacysups.com and level up with Legacy. What was your time? You did World of Sport in the UK, didn't you? What was your time in the UK like?
Yeah, it was great. It was my very first matches. I'd never even had a match in Stampede. At that time, Bruce and Brett and Keith were all wrestling, and it was just like too many Harts already, that there were wrestling, and and it was maybe too much pressure on me to debut and try to keep up with them, and at the time I was still going to university, so I took a semester off, and then I went to Europe for a vacation, but I actually had my very first matches in a tournament in Budapest, Hungary, of all places. There's some German promoter, some Hungarian guy named Arpad Weber who ran some shows in Austria and Hungary. And
what a fantastic name!
Yeah, this was 1983, when we're still a communist bloc country. And anyway, some wrestlers weren't able to get across the border with their passports, or their visas weren't correct, and they didn't let them through. And I happened to have my wrestling gear with me, even though I wasn't scheduled to be on the shows. I was just going to go there for, to watch the matches. And then they said, we need you to wrestle. Some of our other wrestlers didn't, get through the border. And so that's where I had my very first matches. And, it was a different experience for sure, with the language barriers and everything. And then I joined up with my brother Owen, and a couple months later, we wrestled for joint promotions, and I had televised matches, and it was a great experience. In England, they at that time treated the wrestling a little more seriously, and there was definitely more mat wrestling, and was more traditional wrestling, than what was going on in North America. So, it was a great experience, and wrestling in older halls and community centers and some of these theaters, was a pretty neat experience.
Yeah, and through World of Sport, I mean, pro wrestling was such a big thing in the United Kingdom in the 70s and 80s, but particularly the 70s. I mean, it was just incredible, the mainstream exposure and acceptance that wrestling had. And the next time we would see that, I'm going to jump ahead a bit, Ross, but the next time we'd really see that would be the match the show and the match specifically that made me a wrestling fan, which is behind me there, August 29th, 1992, SummerSlam, Wembley Stadium. That was what got me hooked 30 odd years ago. The absolute clinic put on by your brother Brett and brother-in-law, British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith. Now that match, still 30 odd years old, holds a very special place in many fans' hearts. And of course, it was kind of built around this very realistic for a time storyline, this family turmoil of a family imploding around your sister Diana being caught in the middle. What are your memories of that match and all the lead up to it, and also why it's so beloved 3 decades on?
Yeah, just an incredible match. And even though Brett and Davey had previously wrestled, in the Hart Foundation British Bulldogs feud, right, and had some matches on Stampede before that, and had been tag team partners as well. And it was very well known they were brother-in-laws, that Davey had married Brett's sister. The WWF really played well, on that storyline, and it was just such a natural storyline. It didn't need a lot of drama. They didn't need any abductions or blackmailing or anything like that. Some of these very contrived storylines they've had over the years with wrestling. This was just kind of an internal family battle, for the Intercontinental title, and Diana being kind of caught in the middle, like you said, between Brett and Davey. And it was a great intrigue about it. And Davey had never won the singles title before. He had been successful in the tag team wars. Now he's breaking out as the British Bulldog, as a individual star. So and it was a classic baby face match. Brett was a baby face, Davey was a baby face. And to have it in Wembley, England, it's like Davey's backyard, perfect location, and then, they had like nearly 70,000 fans live at the show, and, and they let them wrestle, I think the match was over 30 minutes, and, just a classic match. And, Davey had overcome a staph infection, and he'd been out of action for a month prior to the match, and there was some doubt whether he'd even be ready to perform, and, he and Brett didn't even have much time to meet, get together and put the match together, but they did, I think, really just on the day of the show. And then I think Brett basically knew how to lay the whole match out. And for Davey, just because there was some ring rust and he hadn't been in the ring for over a month, he was very worried. I think even in the first minute, he was already running out of breath, and Brett just, calmed him down and said, we're going to be okay. Just follow my lead, and it was just a tremendous match, back and forth. And, it was a testament to both their working abilities, that they put on such a flawless match, incredible finish, Davey sat out Brett's victory roll and got the victory, and the people loved it. And, Davey was crowned as a new champion. And it actually helped Brett. I think Brett came across as someone who was initially disappointed and upset at losing, a high stakes match, and then when he and Davey and Diana embraced at the end of the match, it was just one of those great moments in wrestling, and it was great for both their careers. It really was, and it's definitely my most memorable SummerSlam match, maybe pay-per-view match of any that I've seen. It was just such a classic match, and did so much for both their careers.
Where did you watch it?
I think I watched it maybe at trying to remember now. I think it was at one of my sister's houses. We ordered it on pay-per-view and watched it live, and we had no idea how the match was going to go, ourselves. I had a feeling maybe Davey might be winning the title. It just seemed like the time was right. So we had no idea what the outcome was going to be or anything, and it was just a perfectly laid out match, and so we were able to enjoy it just like other fans, and we usually watched a lot of the pay-per-views from one of our sisters or families' homes, when Diana was in the city, because she and Davey had been living in Florida for the most part. But, when we were together in Calgary, we would always watch it from someone's home, and it was kind of nice. Sometimes we'd go to, a bar or a theater, but we really like to just be with our family members to watch the shows and enjoy it ourselves. So, yeah, and it was great to see that match unfold, and, definitely one of my favorite memories.
How was it for Diana being involved in being really immersed in a WWF storyline?
I think interesting. Diana was very, very modest, very quiet, but she was used very well in that storyline. She handled it really well. I mean, she was a beautiful girl, but there was nothing that was pretentious or sleazy about her role. Nothing over dramatic. And then they kind of did a storyline with her later with Shawn Michaels, and it appeared like she was Shawn was coming on to her or something, and I didn't think that was very well done. I thought that was kind of exploitative, and it ruffled some feathers in my family. My dad wasn't very happy with that, but Diana actually was a good performer. She could play a number of roles well, but she just seemed to be a wife and sister-in-law caught, in the middle there, and her emotions and expressions I thought were perfect. Like in her own right, she showed she could be a really good performer.
I think if you take Diana away from that equation, it's a very different match. I think it's such an iconic scene at the end of SummerSlam, the three of them in the ring, arms raised, fireworks going. But without that family dynamic, I don't think it would have been the same. No,
it wouldn't have been the same at all. No. And, it was kind of that human touch, and then at the end, it was just they all played it so well. Brett was initially dejected after losing the match and the title, and the fans were going crazy because Davey won, and then there was that little awkwardness, that tension at the end, and then they all kind of put their differences aside and embraced each other in the ring. And, it'd be kind of similar to seeing two brothers competing against each other in a Super Bowl or something, but when you add the third element, that female element, it makes it even more touching.
And you mentioned Shawn Michaels, though. I believe the original plan, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the original plan was that it was supposed to be Bret versus Shawn Michaels for the championship, with Ultimate Warrior and Macho Man doing the classic big man or, main event at that show. And that Bret convinced Vince McMahon that actually they should be the main event, that it should be A versus a Bulldog in London, after they changed the venue, but also B, that they should be the main event because no one else could follow them. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not sure if Shawn was the original opponent scheduled to face Bret or not, but I know Bret really advocated for Davey, and said this is the right time for Davey. And Bret was well established as Intercontinental Champion, and he had really made that nice transition from tag team to singles wrestling, and he was the most over baby face in the promotion at the time. There was nobody more popular than Bret. And so I think
and that was always the case on UK tours. Just as someone who went to many UK tours and was a huge fan of your brother growing up. I mean, that the Bret Hitman Hart reaction, there was something about his connection with the crowd which was unlike anyone else on the card. It was like a rock star come into the venue. It was very different to everyone else, and that never changed throughout his career.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, it was just the perfect time and place. And, and Bret was absolutely right. Like nothing else could have followed their match. Right. And it was fitting that, Davey wrestle in his home country in the last match of the show. It should have been the final match. And, it wouldn't have, it wouldn't have been well received if it had just been preceding the Warriors and Savages match, which wasn't that great anyway. It was pretty limited, even with all the outside elements there with Sensational Sherry and Elizabeth and everything. It really made sense to put Bret and Davey's match on last and give them as much time as they needed, because it went about 30 minutes, I think, and it was just a classic layout, and it went perfectly. And and again, it helped Bret a lot, because in dropping that title as gracefully as he did, and showing some sportsmanship and kind of reconciling with Davey and Diana, at the end of the show, he got a lot of empathy. And then, a month later, they put the world title on him. They had him beat Ric Flair in Saskatoon here. And so, it actually elevated Bret's position, made him an even stronger star. Yeah. So sometimes in losing, you can become stronger. And, it was a win-win situation for both Bret and Davey.
And in a very surprising way, he became WWF champion very quickly at essentially an untelevised house show that was straight to video. But in Canada, in Saskatoon, in front of a crowd that really, very strange, but a crowd that really understood. I don't think anyone quite understood what was happening in the moment that a title change had happened.
No, really odd, and I think it was there was obviously some urgency in having Ric Flair drop the title. I guess they didn't have him in their long-term plans after all, and then they decided they had to have him drop it, to someone right away. And at the time, Warrior was leaving, and Davey unfortunately left shortly after that, over the steroid scandal, I guess. So it made sense, that Bret was the right guy, even though he just dropped the Intercontinental title. And so they didn't even schedule it for a pay-per-view match or build up a title match with him and Flair. They just had him beat Flair in Saskatoon, and and they filmed it, but it really wasn't a televised match, and totally different from what you see today. So, and Bret was certainly ready for the role, and he had a really good following in North America, but especially in Europe, in the UK and Germany, his merchandise was outselling everybody's there. And he was a huge drawing card in all those places. And so while the North American market had dropped somewhat for live shows, after Hulkamania and the Macho Man and Ultimate Warrior periods were over. And there was a bit of a drop in business, a decline in the industry in North America. It was just huge in Europe, and a lot of that was because of Bret's popularity.
Yeah, and I believe that was part of the rationale for why SummerSlam came over to the UK in the first place. Was it originally a US venue was swapped for the UK, and what a great move that was, because I think wrestling was huge in mid 1992, and it was just the perfect moment, I think, in terms of pop culture. Going ahead a little bit further to more family feuds. I mean, one of the best feuds in wrestling history, and my favourites of all time, is Bret versus Owen. That had such a slow build, but boy, when it actually kicked off, it really delivered. And the WrestleMania 10 match that they had together, I would still say is the best opening match to a show of all time. What are your memories of the rivalry and Owen coming out of the shadow, as it were? And what did your parents think to their little boy taking on the Hitman?
Pretty amazing phenomenon. Owen had always been a baby face. Someone who followed the rules and good high flyer and nothing devious or evil about him at all. Unfortunately, his career was floundering a little bit. At the time, the WWF wasn't doing much with him, and Bret was champion at the time, and maybe their logic or rationale is they can't have both Harts really strong, and they're using Owen more underneath to put guys over to wrestle against Bret. Guys like Jerry Lawler and Bam Bam Bigelow, I guess, and some others, and he wasn't being utilized very well, and not in a great position in his career, I guess, and so I think Bret kind of came up with this idea. Let's turn you heel, against me, but we'll do it subtly. And so it was kind of a storyline where they had tag teamed a little bit. And I think they had the Survivor Series tag team match where actually Bret, Owen, Bruce, and Keith all teamed. It was supposed to be against Jerry Lawler and some other wrestlers, and then Jerry couldn't wrestle in the match because he was under investigation for some incident with a minor or something like that, and he couldn't wrestle on the show. But anyway, but they kind of developed the storyline where Owen became the jealous brother, and looking from the outside at Bret's success and wanting that for himself. And they played it up very well, and then I think they had a tag title match, I think, against the Mounties, or if I'm not mistaken.
Quebecers.
Yeah, Quebecers, right? Yeah. And in some kind of a miscue, and Bret caused Owen to lose the match or something, and then Owen just becoming very, very, very jealous and bitter, toward his brother Bret, and a really good storyline. But they took their time in building it up for a few months, and then Owen kind of challenging Bret, at the WrestleMania match. And I don't think anybody knew quite what to expect, how good a match was going to be, but I don't think anyone expected Owen to win,
No.
He was definitely the underdog in the match, and
my 10-year-old self, I was very, very angry about that.
yeah. And Owen won, even though Bret, I think, ultimately came back and won the title later on that show against Yokozuna.
I think that was the masterclass of it. That moment at the end of WrestleMania 10 where, Owen's beaten him. He's finally jumped out of the shadow, and still Bret one-ups him. And he's standing, I remember that, Owen's standing in the aisle of Madison Square Garden, just everyone's inviting him in. And he's like, I beat you. And it's just every time he just couldn't get out of that shadow. And I just think for anyone that's ever had a sibling, it was such a fantastic rivalry. For you just feel it, don't you? That brother or sister that's always getting ahead of you, and he just played that part so wonderfully. Owen did. He
did.
Such a natural heel, but at the same time, you wanted to cheer him because you could understand where he was coming from throughout the entire feud. But actually, it wasn't really fair. Even though Bret wasn't doing anything wrong, but equally, you kind of wanted Owen to succeed because you felt like he deserved his moment too.
Yeah, he had never had that opportunity or the breaks maybe that Brett did. And, and as the younger brother, it's natural you could be maybe envious, but then kind of bitter and jealous. And, and Owen played that role very well. And, he was a good heel wrestler, I mean, he'd always been a baby face in his career other than maybe a few tours of Japan. And he always stayed pretty close to his high flying scientific model, but he pulled off the heel role very well. He went on to win the King of the Ring tournament, and then just became more more sneaky, more diabolical. And it's just sort of like all that frustration, and anger had exploded with him, and now he was very devious and trying to foil Brett whenever he could, cause Brett to lose the title to Bob Backlund. And
made your mum throw in the towel.
Yeah, my mom and dad were at the show, and it was interesting. They had never wanted to be in the spotlight or in the storylines like that, but I think they had kind of retired from the wrestling role somewhat. They didn't have to run the day-to-day industry anymore, and they just thought, well, if it's going to help Brett and Owen's careers, and we can be part of the storyline, and it's nothing completely outrageous or sleazy, they'll do it. So, and my mom and dad were both great. My dad's reaction, he was pissed off as hell that they stopped the match, and my mom, kind of broke down. Owen was pleading in tears, to throw in the towel because Backlund had the chicken wing submission on Brett. My mom finally did it, and then Owen, laughing and rubbing it in after, it was great entertainment. It was a great storyline, and their rivalry was great for about a year, and they had the big cage match at SummerSlam, and it was great. But I think for Brett, he knew this would boost Owen's career, and he was a great opponent for Brett, and he had some fantastic matches. They had some of those Iron Man matches where they'd wrestle for an hour, and regardless of the storyline or the angle, their matches were great. It's just hold for hold. You didn't see better wrestling than that.
I wanted to ask you about the big blue steel cage match. I mean, you were one of the, talk about a family affair. You were one of the many Hart brothers that tried to scale the cage and get into that. What was that? What was that night like to be all of you in the main event?
Yeah, it was very well done. And then and they kind of involved a few other family members, so some who were, I think, mostly on Brett's side because he was sympathetic. He was sort of the protagonist, and Owen was being pretty dastardly, and so they involved, I think, Davey Boy and Jim Neidhart, who was sitting at ringside, so it looked like a family affair and the family dynamics, and Jim kind of taking Owen's side, and Davey, trying to rescue Brett there. So it created, some new elements, I guess, and then so they had Owen and Jim tag teaming against Brett and Davey for several months, and it just continued the storyline, which was great, and was very entertaining. It was fun for a lot of us to be involved like that, and it was great for the fans as well because they saw some incredible matches.
And then what was really incredible was a few years later, obviously, we had the Hart Foundation come together with Brett and Owen and Davey Boy and Jim Neidhart and Brian Pillman forming this incredible team. And, when it comes to family affairs, I don't think anything will ever top In Your House, Canadian Stampede, Calgary, July 1997. I mean, the atmosphere on that night was off the charts. I've never seen anything like it before or since. And when everyone came out, when each member of the Hart Foundation was announced, it just got louder and louder and louder and louder. And you get to the end of the match. Owen scores the sneaky roll up on Steve Austin. Everyone in the Hart family comes into the ring. Your mum and dad, all of the children, all of the grandchildren, everyone's in that ring. What was that weekend like when you took over Calgary? Really?
Yeah, we really did. It was just incredible. It was during the Stampede, which is the peak celebration, for fans everywhere, and the Saddle Dome was sold out. It was a huge pay-per-view event, and it was this Canada versus US feud, and what a great storyline, because everywhere in the States where the Hart Foundation was appearing, they were getting booed, and with the anti-American rhetoric and sentiment, and Brett had completely done a 360 in the US, and now he's very anti-American but pro-Canadian, and in Canada, everywhere they went, they were loved by the fans, whether it was St. John's, Newfoundland, or Toronto, or Vancouver, everywhere they went, they were beloved, and people just got so involved with this Canada versus US feud, and it was
sorry to jump in, Ross, but also it was everywhere else, because I was in the UK for one night only in September '97, and I remember you hear the commentary back, and I think it's Jerry Lawler, I can't remember who it was in commentary, but saying, "Oh, it's a very mixed reaction for Bret Hitman Hart." It really wasn't. I was in Birmingham that night. It was almost like it was the world against the USA. It wasn't a Canada USA thing. That group maintained their hero status wherever they went, almost for going against the US in an interesting way.
Yeah, no, it was just incredible, and just bringing all the family members, the older generations, and then the grandchildren, to celebrate the victory at the end. It was just like a classic family celebration, and I've never seen anything like that. Nothing really topped that. And it was unfortunate they couldn't keep that rivalry, that storyline going, because you had Brett feuding with the Undertaker and Shawn Michaels for the world title, Owen with Stone Cold, and Owen and Davey Boy had been a tag team as well, and then Jim as well, and Brian Pillman, so and all true family members, going at it with Stone Cold, with the Legion of Doom, with Ken Shamrock, with all those guys. It was just incredible, and there were so many different matchups and storylines, and it unfortunately never reached the level that it should have, because of the Survivor Series incident, Brett's very sudden departure from WWE, and it was great, they had that feud, but it could have gone on for a couple of years. It was such a good storyline, and it was huge business everywhere, so they would be booed like hell in the US, right? And then in Canada, fans loved them everywhere, so it was it was just a natural drawing card, and tremendous period in the business at that time. I think it was really good for fans and wrestlers alike, and it's just too bad that it kind of prematurely ended there.
I'd also like to really get your thoughts on the British Bulldogs as a team. So you've written the foreword to Dynamite and Davey by Stephen Bell, an excellent book that really chronicles their lives. And in that you wrote that Dynamite Kid's arrival in Calgary in 1978 would be life-changing. His rapid-fire and explosive offense in matches with Brett, Bruce and other opponents saved the financially struggling promotion from growing under. And you've also talked about them as a tag team, describing their remarkable athleticism, incredible matches, and mass global appeal. What was it about the Bulldogs that made them such a winning combination?
A few factors. I think the fact that they came from the UK, and we had a kind of a celebrated history. A few years earlier, when Billy Robinson first came over, and then a few others like Les Thornton and Jeff Ports and Wild Angus, so some of these guys from the UK got over really well here, became big stars in Stampede, and then went on to even bigger success, in the US, for AWA and NWA and some of these other promotions. And then there had been kind of a lull for a few years, and then when Dynamite Kid came over in 1978, it was just something about him. He was so explosive. He was so unique. Like, people had never seen anything like him. And it created this interest in the junior heavyweight division. For the smaller wrestlers. That way, we didn't have to waste the smaller guys against bigger guys, and it was sort of that, outdated, archaic idea that, smaller guy can't beat a bigger guy, and usually that's what happened in a lot of the territories, so when we kind of launched this junior heavyweight division, so Dynamite could wrestle against Brett and Bruce and a lot of other smaller wrestlers. It was great because they were having the best matches on the show. And it was Dynamite was just phenomenal on what he did. His speed, his reactiveness, his explosions in the ring, and when we brought Davey over a few years after Dynamite got established, it was great because Dynamite helped launch Davey. They were rivals in the ring, and people didn't know that they were cousins. They didn't even know there was a actual relationship in the ring. Dynamite even talked about what he was going to do to Davey and called him, a ugly looking stepchild, right? And and he was going to immobilize him because he was moving in on Dynamite's territory, and people didn't even have any idea that they were actually cousins. So right. But and it was just a great storyline for a few years, and they both had a similar history. They both trained with Ted Bentley in England. So Davey was very talented as well, and probably the closest who could compete with Dynamite, at his level, just because of his training and his upbringing. Davey had a pretty good foundation in the UK before he came here, I think in 1981, about 3 years after Dynamite. But so, they had incredible matches as opponents, and then when we put them together as a team, people just loved it, because their styles were so similar and they complemented each other so well in the ring. And I think they initially got over really well in New Japan. They were doing some tours there and were part of that junior heavyweight division. And then they made them a tag team there as well. And, before you knew it, they were catching everybody's eyes, so everybody, including Vince McMahon and Vern Gagne and the NWA, wanted to sign the Bulldogs. And it was just sort of at that height of the promotional war when WWE started their expansion in North America, and it was the big territorial war with AWA and NWA. They wanted to sign the Bulldogs, and Vince had to go to a lot of trouble to re-sign them. Initially they weren't very happy at how they were being used, and they I guess WWF didn't get launched as well in Canada as they had in the States initially, right? And they didn't use Brett or Dynamite or Davey that well, and they kind of passed, and they just said, we'll just continue wrestling in Japan, and I think once Vince realized he had lost them, and missed out on a really good opportunity, he went out of his way to eventually sign them. He kind of used my dad as a third party there to kind of relaunch talks and made them such a good offer, and even with stipulation that they would continue their tours with All Japan. They had switched over from New Japan to All Japan, and that made it even more difficult for them to work in the WWE because WWE they had a partnership with New Japan, and they were sending talent over to work with them. And when Dynamite Davey jumped promotions and switched over to All Japan, it looked like there was never any opportunity they'd be able to go back to WWE. And Vince had to make them an offer that they couldn't refuse. So that was such an interesting story. And he was able to re-sign them, and they were the only ones that had that exclusive freedom to do 3 tours of Japan during the year. While they were still working for WWE, so, and that just gave them great exposure. And when they started there, the best guys they could work with were the Hart Foundation, so it was again a win-win situation. There was another family dynamics feud because Brett was a brother-in-law of Davey and Dynamite, and people in the Stampede promotion, knew about that. So, and Jim, who was also an in-law of the family, had married my sister Ellie. So that dynamic, just made it such an interesting storyline. And they had incredible matches, and a lot of that I think was based on their previous matches and working together in Stampede, years before. So it was just an incredible phenomenon, for Dynamite and Davey. And I still think they're one of the most unique and talented teams ever in the WWE. There really hasn't been a team that could surpass them, for great matches and their ability to work well with any team. They could work with the Hart Foundation, they could work with the Killer Bees, they could work with, say, Big John Studd and King Kong Bundy. They could work against the Funk Brothers. So it was a real testament to their skill level and their staying power that they could have great matches against anybody. And they both complemented each other so well. And Dynamite had more of the speed, Davey more of the power, and it was an incredible ride they had.
Hello, my name is Stephen Bell, and I'm the author of the book Dynamite and Davey, The Explosive Lives of the British Bulldogs. I'm really pleased to hear two friends of mine, Ben and Ross, having this great conversation. Many of Ross's fantastic family contributed towards the book, but Ross quickly became the linchpin of my research, and I was honoured when he agreed to write the foreword. The book exclusively tells the story of Tom Billington and Davey Boy Smith's rollercoaster careers as cousins, friends, tag team partners, and ultimately, mortal enemies. The exclusive content means you can learn for the first time how they made it to the top from humble beginnings, but how living life in the fast lane ultimately led to both wrestling legends' tragic demise. Bronwyn Billington, the daughter of the Dynamite Kid, pens a beautiful and heartfelt afterword to ensure that despite 380 pages of white-knuckle roller coaster, there won't be a dry eye in the house at the turn of the final page. The book is available in hardback, ebook and audiobook now on Amazon and Audible. That's Dynamite and Davey, The Explosive Lives of the British Bulldogs, by me, Stephen Bell.
And talking to people in your family who are incredibly talented, I mean, your younger brother Owen is very deeply missed. But we've heard so many accounts as fans of what a kind, kind of family-focused man he was, but also we've heard about this wicked sense of humour he had and how he was kind of the king of the rib, as it were. Being the baby of in such a large family, was that kind of how he separated himself from the herd to be the joker of the pack?
Yeah, Owen had always been mischievous and a prankster, but he got it from a few others in my family. My late brother Dean and Bruce, they were real pranksters. Sometimes they would pull pranks on wrestling fans, a lot on the wrestlers or boys themselves, and sometimes even my dad. Owen would impersonate somebody like a telemarketer or somebody, and then phone my dad, during a busy day at the office, when he was trying to get all the wrestlers on their way to a show and dealing with all the headaches of the day-to-day business. Then Owen would be calling and impersonating, someone trying to sell something, and in a very low, meek voice, and my dad wouldn't catch on at first, and he would be so pissed off, and he'd say, "Speak up, for Christ's sakes! I can't even hear what the hell you're saying," and and then Owen, after a couple of minutes, he would just burst out laughing, and because he couldn't hold it any longer, and my dad realized, that there had been Owen, that called him and pranked him again, but Owen, he, his ribs were never hurtful or harmful. It's not like he ever X-laxed somebody or put halcyon in somebody's drink or something, or shaved their eyebrows or something, so some of the Bulldogs' ribs were pretty nasty, if they targeted somebody, somebody that pissed them off, Owens were usually less harmful, and they were shorter lived, but it was funny because I think that's how they survived all of the harsh aspects of being on the road, the long trips and the late hours and making the early plane connections and being away from their families, so sometimes it was just a survival tool, to pull some pranks, and and that's what Owen did, and yet he was just a really good person. He was very generous, very compassionate. He would always sign an autograph or take a picture for a fan. He would visit hospitals with sick kids, so I think Owen just had so much compassion and empathy, for people of all walks of life, and that's what always stood out about him, even though he had this mischievous side, and it's we all love that about Owen, and he never took life too seriously, and made it enjoyable for himself and everybody around him.
And kind of fast forwarding now to the present day, just conscious of your time, Ross, but it's really amazing that we're now seeing pro wrestling being put back on the map in Calgary. So we were talking off air before about the opening of Hitman's Bar. We've also had the launch of Dungeon Wrestling. I mean, for a family that's so deeply rooted in Calgary, I imagine you must be very proud to see the next generation taking it forward now. Yeah,
I was just at the recent Dungeon show a week ago, and they feature new stars on every card, and I think it's a great independent promotion. There's a lot of history there, dating back to Brett's and Owens and Bruce's and Keith's early involvement in promotion, and my dad. So it's a nice carry on of that name, Dungeon Pro Wrestling, because the Dungeon is where so many got their start. That's where so many cut their teeth in wrestling, and so it's great to see. And then there's just a lot of new young stars, getting their opportunity to wrestle. And my nephew Harry's been showcased. He was unfortunately injured. He wasn't able to wrestle on the last show. He had a major appendix surgery, so we're hoping he'll be back on the next show. But they've had some great stars. Nick Aldis was the previous champion. I'm not sure now. He's the GM, I guess, for SmackDown. I don't know if we'll see him, but he had been the champion, and there was a big rivalry with him and Harry. It was kind of a classic rivalry. Harry has his roots in the UK, and so does Nick Aldis. So it was unfortunate that rematch couldn't take place, and I'm not sure what Nick's status is now with the WWE. And yet, I think for him just to be GM was kind of a waste of his talents. He's an incredible in-ring performer, and hopefully, they showcase him for his talent in the ring, not just behind the scenes. But Harry's certainly one of the featured stars. And then Mark and Thomas, Dynamite Kid's nephews, they show a lot of promise. They've been put over really well in the first 4 or 5 shows, and it's great, especially Thomas. He looks so much like Dynamite, very much like his uncle, and just has that quickness, that agility, and even looks like Dynamite, looks so much like him. So it's great. These younger stars are getting their opportunity on these shows here, and we're able to hold the shows in the pavilion, which was the traditional setting of all the Stampede matches every Friday, for decades. And that building, it's sort of a historical treasure now, with the Stampede. And unlike a lot of the other landscapes, they've been demolished and replaced with newer buildings. Even the Saddle Dome itself is going to be replaced as the hockey arena for the Calgary Flames. But that Victoria Pavilion, which was built, I think, sometime in the 1930s or 40s, is still standing, and it's great that Dungeon Wrestling can hold their shows there. So it's been great to watch these shows, and I'm hoping that they can expand the promotion to other cities as well, and it can catch on and can develop a bigger following all over Western Canada.
Yeah, I'd love to come along to a show. It looks fantastic. I've spoken to Nick quite a few times about his involvement in it, and I know he's very proud to be the first Stu Hart heavyweight champion.
Yeah, absolutely. So
and how wonderful as well to have that heritage, to have a belt with your father on the belt. It's just such a nice kind of full circle homage to your family's heritage.
Yeah, it really is. It's preserving that legacy, and my dad's contribution to the industry for sure. So.
And then, of course, on a global scale, you've also got Natty doing incredible things in WWE and has been keeping the Hart family legacy going on a big stage for many years as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very proud of Natalie, or Natalia as she's called, and she's had a lot of staying power there. I think she's been longer than any woman in the industry, and she still looks great. I think she could wrestle a few more years, and hopefully she might have one more title run in her. I think she's had the women's title twice now, the Divas title and the women's title, but she's overcome a few injuries, but she's looking great. She's come in with a new appearance and a new look, and looking great, and holding her own against a lot of the the younger talented women. It's a very competitive division, but Natty still seems to have her spot, and she's still got a huge following there, which is nice to see.
So my very last question, Ross, there's been a number of fameless wrestling families out there, but when it comes to sheer impact, to stars produced and to enduring legacy, surely the Hart family has to be the best there is, the best was, and the best there ever will be, doesn't it?
I think so, absolutely. And it's nice because we're well known, in the industry, but there've been so many others. There've been the Von Erichs, right? There's been the Mike Rotundo's family, with a number of those stars. A lot of second and third generation wrestlers, but it just seems like the Hart family. We're still going strong. There's just so many layers, of success. From my dad on to Brett and Owen's period, and now on the next level with Harry and Natalia, and even TJ and my nephew Ted, who had some success there for some time, and that's great, and we still have a great following, and it's nice to have that recognition and support from so many fans, not just in Canada but worldwide. So,
well, everyone, I encourage you to give Dungeon Wrestling a follow and see what they're doing. Follow all the Hart family, and I just thank you, Ross, for giving up your time today, and on behalf of all us wrestling fans, thank you for all of the memories that your family's given us, really.
Thank you, Ben. It was a pleasure to be on your show, and look forward to being a guest again sometime. Absolutely. We've got a lot of ground still to cover. So that's it for another Wrestling Live. Thank you to my guest, Ross Hart. Thank you to my producer, Jeff Easton from Too Late Productions, who always brings Wrestling Life to life. Thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us. We'll be back soon with more real talk from real talent. In the meantime, be good to each other. See you soon.